The rusted chain-link fence around the abandoned Demon's Den clubhouse had kept intruders out for 3 years. Weeds choked the cracked parking lot where Harley-Davidsons once thundered. The building stood like a tomb, windows boarded, silence thick as smoke. Then neighbors heard crying in the night. When police broke down the reinforced door, they expected squatters or drug addicts. Instead, they found Maya Rodriguez, 8 months pregnant, living in a fortress of evidence that could destroy the Hells Angels forever. The walls were covered with photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes connecting the club to murders, money laundering, and missing persons cases spanning decades. Maya wasn't just some runaway. She was the daughter of the club's former president and an undercover federal agent who'd spent 2 years infiltrating her own father's criminal empire. Her pregnancy wasn't an accident, it was her cover, her protection, and now her greatest vulnerability. The baby's father was the club's current leader, a man who'd kill anyone who threatened their brotherhood. But what Maya discovered in those files would either bring justice to countless victims or get her and her unborn child eliminated before the truth could surface. Could one woman's courage expose a criminal dynasty that had ruled through fear for generations? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Detective Sarah Chen stepped carefully through the debris-strewn entrance, her flashlight cutting through the musty darkness. The smell hit her first, a mixture of motor oil, leather, and something else she couldn't identify. Fear, maybe, or desperation. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," Chen called out. But the pregnant woman pressed herself deeper into the corner of what had once been the club's meeting room. Around her, manila folders spilled their contents across the concrete floor like fallen leaves. Maya's dark eyes darted between the officers, calculating. She'd been hiding here for 6 weeks, ever since she'd discovered the truth about her father's death. The official story was a heart attack during a raid. The reality was execution, ordered by his own successor when he tried to leave the life behind. "You don't understand," Maya whispered, her hands protectively cradling her swollen belly. "They think I'm dead. If they find out I'm alive, if they know what I've found—" She gestured weakly at the evidence surrounding her. Chen holstered her weapon and crouched down, noting the sleeping bag in the corner, the bottles of water, the protein bars. This woman had been prepared for a siege. "What's your name?" "Maya Rodriguez. Agent Maya Rodriguez, FBI." She pulled out a badge from beneath her oversized jacket, her hands trembling. "I need to call my handler. There's something you need to see." The detective's partner, Officer Jenkins, was already photographing the walls with his phone. Decades of criminal activity mapped out like a twisted family tree. Names, dates, locations, a murder board that would make seasoned detectives weep. "Jesus Christ," Jenkins muttered. "Look at this." He pointed to a series of photographs showing a warehouse operation. "That's the Castellano family warehouse that burned down 5 years ago. 3 people died." Maya struggled to her feet, wincing as the baby shifted inside her. "My father kept backup files of everything. Insurance, he called it. When Victor Reeves took over the club, he ordered all records destroyed. But my father hid copies here, in the walls." She led them to a section of drywall that had been carefully cut and replaced. Behind it, more files were stacked in plastic containers. 40 years of evidence, murders, drug runs, protection rackets, even connections to dirty cops and judges. Chen felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just a case, it was the motherlode. "Why didn't you bring this to the FBI directly?" Maya's laugh was bitter. "Because Victor's people are everywhere. I tried to maintain my cover after my father died, but Victor started getting suspicious. When I realized I was pregnant with his child, I thought it would protect me. Instead, he became more possessive, more controlling." She picked up a photograph from the floor, a young woman with blonde hair and a bright smile. Sarah Martinez, 19 years old. Victor killed her because she tried to leave him. That was 6 months ago. I found her body in a cement mixer at one of their construction sites. The baby kicked hard, and Maya gasped, doubling over. Chen caught her arm. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No hospitals," Maya said firmly. "Victor has people watching the hospitals. The moment I show up anywhere official, I'm dead. The baby's dead. And all of this evidence disappears forever." Jenkins was still taking photos, but his face had gone pale. "Detective, we've got a problem. Look at this list." He held up a sheet of paper covered in neat handwriting. "These are all missing persons cases from the last decade, unsolved cases." Maya nodded grimly. "My father kept a body count. 43 people, all buried in various locations controlled by the club." She pulled out a hand-drawn map marked with X's. "I know where they're all buried." Chen felt the weight of the discovery settling over her like a shroud. This wasn't just evidence of crimes. It was a roadmap to justice for dozens of families who'd never known what happened to their loved ones. But first, they had to keep Maya alive long enough to testify. Detective Sarah Chen pulled her unmarked sedan into the cracked asphalt lot of the abandoned Serpent's Den clubhouse, her partner Mike Rodriguez already scanning the building's boarded windows. The anonymous tip had come in at 3:47 a.m., a pregnant woman spotted moving around inside the supposedly empty Hell's Angels stronghold that had been dark for over 2 years. "Looks like someone's been busy," Rodriguez muttered, pointing to fresh tire tracks cutting through the weeds. The building itself was a testament to better days and worse decisions, brick walls tagged with rival gang symbols, metal security doors hanging askew on rusted hinges. Chen checked her service weapon and radio. "Backup's 10 minutes out. We go in quiet, assess the situation." She'd worked gang cases long enough to know that nothing involving the Serpents was ever simple, even when the club had supposedly disbanded after their president, Tommy Snake Morrison, disappeared 18 months ago. Their footsteps echoed in the main room, where torn leather furniture surrounded a cold fireplace. Beer bottles and drug paraphernalia still littered the floor from the club's final days. But someone had cleared a path through the debris. Fresh water bottles sat on a makeshift table constructed from milk crates and plywood. "Police, we know you're in here," Chen called out. "We're not here to hurt you, we just want to talk." A muffled crash came from somewhere deeper in the building, followed by the sound of running water. Rodriguez gestured toward a hallway that led to what had once been the club's private quarters. They moved carefully, weapons drawn but lowered. The bathroom door was closed, light seeping underneath. Chen knocked gently. "Ma'am, are you okay in there? We're police officers." "I know who you are." The voice was young, maybe early 20s, with an edge of exhaustion that spoke to more than just pregnancy fatigue. "Just give me a minute." Chen and Rodriguez exchanged glances. This wasn't the hostile reception they'd expected from someone hiding in gang territory. The door opened to reveal a petite blonde woman, clearly in her 3rd trimester, wearing an oversized Serpent's Den t-shirt over maternity jeans. Her eyes were puffy from crying but alert and intelligent. She held her hands visible, no threat in her posture. "I'm Kayla Morrison," she said quietly. "I've been waiting for someone to find me." Rodriguez's pen froze over his notepad. "Morrison. As in Tommy Morrison, the missing club president whose disappearance had effectively ended the Serpent's Den chapter." "Are you related to Tommy Morrison?" Chen asked, though the family resemblance was now obvious in the sharp jawline and pale blue eyes. "His daughter." Kayla wrapped her arms around her swollen belly. "And before you ask, no, I don't know where he is. That's actually why I came here." Chen holstered her weapon completely. "Kayla, why don't we sit down and you can tell us what's going on? When's your baby due?" Kayla reached into a canvas bag beside the couch and pulled out a thick manila folder, its edges worn from handling. "Dad didn't just disappear. Someone killed him, and I think I know why." She opened the folder to reveal photographs, documents, and what appeared to be financial records. Chen moved closer, her training automatically cataloguing the evidence spread before them. "These are surveillance photos," Kayla continued, pointing to black and white images of men in expensive suits meeting with recognizable Serpent's Den members. Dad was keeping records of everything: dates, payments, conversations. He was building a case. Rodriguez studied one of the photos. A case against who? That's what I'm still trying to figure out. Kayla's voice cracked slightly. But whoever killed my father is still out there. And when I started asking questions about Dad's investigation, people started following me. That's when I decided to come here, to the last place anyone would look. Chen felt the familiar electricity of a case taking an unexpected turn. What had started as a welfare check on a pregnant woman was becoming something much larger. Kayla, have you shown these to anyone else? Only my boyfriend, Derek. He's the one who suggested I hide here while we figured out what to do. She paused, her hand moving protectively over her belly. Detective, I think my father stumbled onto something big, something worth killing for. And now I'm afraid they'll come after me too. The fluorescent lights in the police station's interview room cast harsh shadows across Maya's face as Detective Sarah Chen studied the woman across the metal table. 3 hours had passed since they'd brought her in from the clubhouse, and Maya hadn't spoken a word beyond confirming her name. Her dark hair hung in unwashed strands, and her oversized flannel shirt couldn't quite hide the obvious curve of her belly. You're about 6 months along, Chen observed, sliding a cup of water across the table. When's the last time you saw a doctor? Maya's fingers wrapped around the plastic cup, but she didn't drink. Her eyes darted toward the one-way mirror, then back to her lap. Chen leaned forward. Maya, we're not here to hurt you, but that clubhouse, it's a crime scene now. We need to understand what you were doing there. I was just staying there. The words came out barely above a whisper. For how long? Few weeks. Maybe a month. Chen made a note. The Hells Angels haven't used that place in over a year. How did you get in? Maya's hand moved protectively to her stomach. Door was already broken. It was a lie. Chen had seen the lockpicks in Maya's backpack, but she let it slide for now. What about the baby's father? Is he around? The question hit like a physical blow. Maya's face went white, and her breathing quickened. Hey, it's okay. Chen softened her voice. Take your time. He's not around anymore. Dead. Maya nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. I don't know. Maybe. He might as well be. Before Chen could follow up, a sharp knock interrupted them. Officer Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Detective? We need you in the hallway. Chen excused herself and followed Rodriguez outside the interview room. What is it? We found something else at the clubhouse. Rodriguez handed her a manila envelope. Crime scene team pulled this from inside a wall cavity. Looks like someone hid it there recently. The drywall dust was fresh. Chen opened the envelope and felt her blood chill. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. License plates, faces, building exteriors. But it was the handwritten notes clipped to each photo that made her stomach drop. Names, addresses, daily routines. This wasn't random surveillance. This was a hit list. Jesus Christ, she breathed, flipping through the images. These are all law enforcement. Look, Judge Martinez, District Attorney Williams, Chief Bradley. She recognized more faces as she went deeper into the stack. This is half the department. There's more, Rodriguez said grimly. The crime scene team found blood in the basement. Not old blood, maybe 2 weeks fresh. And there are drag marks leading to a storm drain that connects to the city sewer system. Chen's mind raced. A pregnant woman hiding in an abandoned clubhouse with assassination plans and evidence of recent violence. Nothing about this made sense. Run the photos through facial recognition, she ordered, and get me everything we have on Hells Angels activity in the past 6 months. Something big was being planned. She was about to return to Maya when her phone buzzed. The text was from an unknown number. Ask her about Tommy Briggs. Ask her why she ran. Chen stared at the screen. Rodriguez, did you? But when she looked up, he was already walking away down the corridor. She tried calling the number back, but it went straight to a disconnected line. Tommy Briggs. The name triggered a memory. She pulled up the department database on her phone and searched. There. Thomas Tommy Briggs, 34, arrested 3 times for drug trafficking, twice for assault, known associate of the Hells Angels, last known address, the same clubhouse where they'd found Maya. But according to the system, Tommy Briggs had been reported missing 6 weeks ago by his parole officer. Chen felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together, though she didn't like the picture they were forming. She returned to the interview room, where Maya sat exactly as she'd left her, staring at the untouched water cup. "Maya, I need to ask you about Tommy Briggs." The reaction was immediate and violent. Maya shot to her feet, the chair clattering backward. Her face went from pale to sheet white. "I don't know anyone by that name." "He lived at that clubhouse. He's been missing for 6 weeks." Chen kept her voice level. "Maya, if someone hurt you, if Tommy hurt you, we can protect you. But you need to tell me the truth." Maya's hands were shaking now, both pressed against her belly. "You don't understand. No one can protect me. Not from them." "From who?" "The club. They're not just dealing drugs anymore. They're into something bigger, something that goes all the way to the top." Maya's voice cracked. "And I know too much." Chen felt the case shifting beneath her feet like quicksand. Whatever this was, it was bigger than a missing person or even a murder. Much bigger. "What do you know, Maya? What aren't you telling me?" Maya looked directly at her for the first time, and Chen saw something that chilled her more than the photographs or the blood evidence. She saw terror. Detective Sarah Chen arrived at the precinct at dawn, her mind still churning from the previous night's discovery. The evidence bags from the clubhouse sat locked in the vault, but their contents haunted her thoughts. She'd seen plenty of criminal conspiracies in her 12 years on the force, but nothing quite like this. The pregnant woman, who'd identified herself only as Maya, remained in protective custody at the hospital. The doctors confirmed she was approximately 7 months along, healthy despite obvious malnutrition and stress. What troubled Chen most wasn't what Maya had said, but what she hadn't said. Every question about her identity, the baby's father, or how she'd ended up in that clubhouse, met with the same vacant stare. Chen's partner, Detective Marcus Torres, was already at his desk when she walked in, surrounded by manila folders and empty coffee cups. The bags under his eyes suggested he'd been there all night. "Tell me you found something useful in those documents," Chen said, settling into her chair across from him. Torres rubbed his stubbled jaw. "Define useful, because what I found is either the key to everything or complete nonsense." He slid a photocopied page across the desk. "Take a look at this." The document appeared to be a ledger with dates spanning the past 18 months. Instead of the usual drug transactions or weapons deals they'd expect from a biker gang, the entries were cryptic. Numbers that could be coordinates, names that didn't match any known Hells Angels members, and amounts that seemed too large for street-level crime. $23 million moved through these accounts, Torres continued. "But here's the weird part. It's all legitimate businesses. Construction companies, shipping firms, even a chain of daycare centers." Chen frowned. "Money laundering?" "That's what I thought, initially. But the money isn't dirty going in, it's clean. Corporate investments, government contracts, private donations. It becomes dirty afterward." Torres was already grabbing his jacket. "Any idea where she went?" "That's where it gets interesting," the sergeant continued. "Traffic cameras picked her up heading toward the financial district, specifically toward the Meridian building." Chen knew the building, 30 floors of high-end law firms, investment companies, and corporate headquarters. Not exactly where she'd expect a pregnant woman from a biker clubhouse to go seeking shelter. 20 minutes later, they stood in the marble lobby of the Meridian building, studying the directory. 47 different businesses occupied the floors above them, from boutique accounting firms to multinational consulting groups. "We need to check every floor," Chen said, but Torres was already shaking his head. "Look at this." He pointed to an entry on the directory, Sanctuary Solutions, LLC, floor 23. Chen felt a chill. Sanctuary, like what Maya kept mumbling at the hospital. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt endless. When the doors opened, they found themselves facing an elegant reception area with no one behind the desk. The Sanctuary Solutions logo, a stylized dove carrying an olive branch, decorated the wall in brushed steel letters. "Hello?" Chen called out, her hand instinctively moving toward her weapon. A door at the far end of the reception area opened, and Maya appeared. But this wasn't the frightened, disheveled woman they'd found in the clubhouse. Her hair was clean and styled, she wore an expensive maternity dress, and her demeanor was completely transformed. "Detectives Chen and Torres," she said with a slight smile. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." "Figure what out?" Torres demanded. Maya gestured for them to follow her into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. That the Hells Angels clubhouse was never about drugs or weapons. It was about providing a believable cover for something much more valuable, which is information. Maya settled into a chair, her hands resting on her swollen belly. For the past 2 years, Sanctuary Solutions has been coordinating the placement of pregnant women in safe houses across the country. Women fleeing abusive situations, witness protection cases, even a few international refugees. Chen's mind raced. And the clubhouse? One of our most effective locations. Who would think to look for vulnerable women in a Hells Angels stronghold? The reputation alone kept most people away. But the ledger, Torres interjected. The money transfers, funding for the Safe House network, corporate sponsors, private donors, even some government black budget allocations. Maya's expression hardened. At least, that's how it was supposed to work, until someone decided our operation was worth more dead than alive. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They hadn't stumbled onto a criminal conspiracy. They'd walked into the middle of someone trying to destroy a legitimate operation that protected the most vulnerable. The fluorescent lights in the county lockup buzzed like dying insects as Detective Sarah Chen sat across from Maya Rodriguez in the cramped interview room. 24 hours had passed since they'd found her in the clubhouse, and Maya's initial shock had crystallized into something harder, a steely resolve that made Chen's instincts prickle. "The baby's father," Chen said, sliding a photo across the metal table. "Tell me about him." Maya's eyes flicked to the surveillance photo of Tommy Razor Kelligan entering the clubhouse 3 months earlier. Her hand moved unconsciously to her rounded belly, a protective gesture Chen had seen dozens of times before. But there was something different here, something that didn't fit the usual pattern of pregnant women caught in bad situations. "Tommy's dead," Maya said simply. "Has been for 2 months." Chen leaned forward. "According to our records, Thomas Kelligan was found in the Sacramento River on August 15th, apparent suicide." She paused, studying Maya's face. "You don't seem surprised." "Nothing about Tommy's death surprised me." "Because you knew it was coming." Maya's laugh was bitter. "Because I knew Tommy. He wasn't the type to jump off bridges. Someone helped him into that water." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Chen had worked gang cases for 8 years, and she'd learned to read the spaces between words. Maya wasn't just a victim, she was a witness, maybe even a participant. Think about it. Anonymous tip leads you straight to me, in a place that's been abandoned for months? Maya's dark eyes held Chen's gaze steady. "I've been hiding for 8 weeks. Nobody knew where I was except..." She trailed off, but Chen could see the calculation behind her silence. Maya was deciding how much truth she could afford to tell. "Except who, Maya?" "Except the person who's been keeping me alive." Maya's voice dropped barely above a whisper. "The same person who killed Tommy." Chen felt the familiar electric charge that came with a case breaking open. "You witnessed Tommy's murder." "I witnessed a lot more than that." Maya reached into her jacket pocket, moving slowly to avoid spooking the guard visible through the wire mesh window. She produced a small digital recorder, scratched and battered. "Tommy wasn't just my boyfriend, detective. He was my informant." The words hit Chen like cold water. Informant for who? DEA, FBI, hell, probably half the alphabet agencies in Washington. Maya set the recorder on the table between them. Tommy got religion about 6 months ago, started recording everything. Meetings, phone calls, transactions. The serpents weren't just running drugs and guns anymore. They were moving into something bigger. Chen stared at the device. If Maya was telling the truth, that recorder could contain evidence of federal crimes spanning multiple jurisdictions. But it could also be an elaborate con, the desperate gambit of a woman facing serious charges. Why didn't you take this to the FBI? Because Tommy found out the club had federal protection. Someone high up was running interference, making evidence disappear, tipping them off about raids. Maya's hand trembled slightly as she spoke. Tommy recorded a phone call 3 days before he died. Senator's chief of staff talking about campaign contributions and legislative votes. That's when we knew we were both dead. The pieces were clicking together in Chen's mind, forming a picture that made her stomach clench. If Maya was telling the truth, they weren't dealing with a simple biker gang anymore. This was corruption that went straight to Washington. The person who's been protecting you, Chen said carefully. Federal agent? Maya nodded. Deputy Marshal named Collins. He was Tommy's handler. After Tommy died, Collins went underground, said the whole operation was compromised. He's been moving me every few weeks, keeping me hidden until what? Until the baby was born. Maya's voice cracked for the first time. Collins thinks whoever killed Tommy will come for the child too. Insurance, he calls it. Make sure I never testify. Chen looked down at the recorder, then back at Maya's face. The young woman's fear was real, but there was something else there, a kind of fierce, maternal determination that transcended her circumstances. Maya, I need you to listen to me very carefully. If what you're telling me is true, then that anonymous tip wasn't random. Someone knows exactly where you are right now. As if summoned by her words, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy boots, moving with purpose. Chen's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon as the footsteps stopped directly outside their door. Maya's eyes went wide with terror. They found me, she whispered. The door handle began to turn. Detective Sarah Chen couldn't shake the image of Maya's terrified face as she drove through the pre-dawn darkness toward the abandoned warehouse district. The pregnant woman's cryptic warning about the list had kept Sarah awake most of the night, turning over every detail of their brief conversation. Maya knew more than she was saying, but fear had clamped her mouth shut tighter than any interrogation technique could open it. The warehouse Maya had whispered about sat like a concrete tomb among a cluster of similarly decrepit buildings. Sarah parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, her breath visible in the cold morning air. She'd made the decision to come alone. If Maya was right about corruption reaching into law enforcement, Sarah couldn't risk exposing her only lead. The building's windows were either boarded up or broken, creating a patchwork of shadows and pale morning light. Sarah circled the perimeter, noting the fresh tire tracks in the mud near a loading dock. Someone had been here recently, despite the warehouse's abandoned appearance. A side door hung slightly ajar, its lock clearly forced. Sarah drew her weapon and stepped inside, immediately hit by the smell of motor oil and something else, something metallic and wrong. Her footsteps echoed in the cavernous space as she moved deeper into the building. The warehouse wasn't as empty as it appeared from outside. Workbenches lined one wall, covered with motorcycle parts and tools, but it was the wall beyond the workbenches that made Sarah's blood run cold. Dozens of photographs were tacked to a massive bulletin board, surveillance shots of politicians, judges, police officers, and business leaders. Red string connected various photos, creating a web of relationships that looked like something from a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. But these weren't the ravings of a paranoid mind. Sarah recognized the meticulous organization, the careful documentation. This was operational planning on a massive scale. She moved closer, studying the faces. Mayor Richardson smiled back at her from a campaign photo, a red X marked across his forehead. Judge Patricia Williams, who'd handed down lenient sentences to several Hells Angels members over the years. Police Commissioner Burke, whose anti-gang initiatives had somehow never seemed to touch the Angels' operations. A manila envelope was pinned to the center of the board with Phase 3 written in block letters. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside were detailed floor plans of the city courthouse, the mayor's office, and the police headquarters. Dates were circled on a calendar, all within the next 2 weeks. Sarah spotted a window near the back of the building and moved toward it, but heavy footsteps at the main entrance told her she was running out of time. She crouched behind a workbench as voices filled the space. "Told you someone's been sniffing around," a gravelly voice was saying. Sarah recognized it as Marcus Tank Rodriguez, the Hells Angels enforcer who'd been notably absent during yesterday's raids. "Doesn't matter," replied another voice, smoother and more educated. "We're moving up the timeline. The girl's disappearance changes everything." Sarah's heart pounded. "They were talking about Maya. She doesn't know enough to hurt us," Tank protested. "She knows about the list. That's enough." The smooth voice belonged to someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Clean this place out. Everything. We go to the backup location." Sarah heard footsteps moving toward the bulletin board where she'd been standing moments earlier. She had to get out. Had to get this information to someone she could trust. But who? If the corruption went as deep as the photograph suggested, she might be signing her own death warrant by reporting what she'd found. The window behind her was old and painted shut, but Sarah managed to force it open with minimal noise. She squeezed through just as she heard Tank's voice boom across the warehouse. "Shit! Someone's been here. Look at this." Sarah ran, not caring about the noise now. Behind her, she could hear shouts and the sound of motorcycles starting up. She reached her car and gunned the engine, her mind racing faster than the vehicle. Maya hadn't just been a witness to drug dealing or weapons trafficking. She'd stumbled onto something that made the Hells Angels' usual criminal activities look like parking violations. The photograph suggested a network of corruption and conspiracy that reached into every level of city government. As Sarah drove back toward the safe house where Maya was being kept, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking or the girl dies." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Someone was watching her every move, and Maya's life hung in the balance. But turning back wasn't an option. Whatever the Hells Angels had planned, it was bigger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The conspiracy wasn't just about crime. It was about power, and someone was willing to kill to protect it. The forensics team had been working the clubhouse for 6 hours when Detective Sarah Chen noticed something the others had missed. While her colleagues focused on the obvious evidence, the financial documents, the surveillance equipment, the encrypted hard drives, she found herself drawn to a seemingly innocuous detail in the corner of what had once been the club's main meeting room. A single loose floorboard creaked under her weight, different from the general deterioration of the abandoned building. Sarah knelt and ran her fingers along its edges, feeling the telltale signs of recent disturbance. The wood had been pried up and replaced multiple times, leaving microscopic scratches that caught the harsh LED worklights. "Martinez," she called to her partner, who was photographing the wall of surveillance monitors. "Bring the crowbar." The floorboard came up easily, revealing a shallow cavity that had been expertly hollowed out. Inside lay a leather portfolio, pristine despite the damp conditions that had claimed most of the clubhouse's contents. Sarah's latex gloves whispered against the leather as she lifted it carefully. The portfolio contained photographs, dozens of them. The first image made her stomach clench. A young woman, barely 18, standing beside a motorcycle outside what appeared to be a truck stop. She looked uncomfortable, her smile forced. The timestamp in the corner read 3 years ago. Sarah flipped to the next photo. The same girl, but months later, visibly pregnant and looking terrified. "Jesus Christ," Martinez muttered, looking over her shoulder. The photographs told a horrifying story. Different girls, different locations, but the same progression. Young women who looked lost, desperate, or runaway, then pregnant, then gone from subsequent photos entirely, replaced by new faces following the same pattern. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reached the final section of the portfolio. These weren't surveillance photos. They were professional headshots, studio lighting, makeup, posed like modeling portfolios. But the girls were clearly the same ones from the earlier surveillance images, transformed from desperate runaways into polished products. At the bottom of the portfolio, she found a business card. Elegant, expensive cardstock with embossed lettering, Sunrise Family Services, connecting hearts, building futures. Below that, an address in the wealthy Hillcrest district, and a name that made Sarah's blood run cold, Dr. Victoria Ashworth. She knew that name. Everyone in the department did. Dr. Ashworth was a pillar of the community, a fertility specialist who ran the city's most exclusive private clinic. She'd been featured in magazines, won humanitarian awards for her work with underprivileged mothers. The mayor's wife had publicly thanked Dr. Ashworth for helping her conceive after years of failed attempts. "We need to call this in," Martinez said, but Sarah was already shaking her head. "Not yet. Look at this." She showed him the back of one photograph where someone had written notes in careful handwriting. Blood type O negative, no family, no missing person report filed. The clinical notation made it clear this wasn't just documentation. It was inventory. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from the officer watching over the pregnant woman at the hospital. "She's asking for you. Says she remembers something important." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat beside the hospital bed, where the woman who called herself Amy stared at the photograph Sarah had carefully selected from the portfolio, one of the studio shots of a blonde girl who couldn't have been more than 17. "Her name was Jessica," Amy whispered, her voice barely audible. "She was here when I arrived. Dr. Ashworth said she was going to help us, that we'd be able to start over after we helped other families. What happened to Jessica?" Amy's eyes filled with tears. "She delivered 2 weeks before I left. A healthy boy. But when I asked to see her the next day, they told me she'd decided to move on, start fresh somewhere else." Amy looked directly at Sarah, but I saw them take her to the basement that night. I heard her screaming, and then nothing. Sarah felt the case shift beneath her feet like unstable ground. This wasn't just about a motorcycle club's illegal activities. The Hells Angels had been providing something much more valuable than drugs or weapons. They'd been supplying desperate young women to what appeared to be a high-end baby trafficking operation, disguised as legitimate adoption services. "Amy," Sarah said gently, "how many girls were there when you arrived?" 8, but they came and went. Some were only there a few days before they were moved to better facilities. Others stayed longer if they couldn't get pregnant right away. The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just trafficking. It was systematic exploitation on a scale that reached into the highest levels of society. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed Lieutenant Morrison. "Chen, we've got a problem. Word got out about the clubhouse raid. Dr. Ashworth's clinic was evacuated an hour ago due to a gas leak, and she's nowhere to be found." The abandoned gas station sat like a broken tooth against the desert horizon, its rusted pumps standing sentinel over cracked asphalt and tumbleweeds. Detective Sarah Chen pulled her unmarked sedan behind the building, the engine ticking as it cooled in the oppressive afternoon heat. Marcus had insisted on coming alone to this meeting, but she'd followed at a distance, her instincts screaming that something wasn't right. Through her binoculars, she watched him emerge from his motorcycle, leather jacket creaking as he surveyed the desolate landscape. The informant was late, never a good sign in her experience. She'd seen too many deals go sideways in places like this, where the nearest help was 50 miles away and the buzzards had grown fat on poor decisions. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon, growing larger until it resolved into a battered pickup truck. Chen focused her lenses on the driver as he stepped out, tall, wiry, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of hard living and harder choices. She recognized him from their surveillance photos, Tommy Needles Morrison, a former Hells Angels prospect who'd been kicked out for stealing from the club treasury. The two men met in the shadow of the defunct service bay, their voices carried away by the desert wind. Chen wished she'd had time to plant surveillance equipment, but Marcus had received the call less than an hour ago. Needles had claimed to have information about the conspiracy Maya had stumbled into, something that would blow the whole thing wide open. Through her binoculars, she could see Marcus showing Needles the photographs they'd found in Maya's possession, the ones depicting what appeared to be a sophisticated money laundering operation involving legitimate businesses across 3 states. Needles nodded vigorously, pulling out his own manila envelope. Chen's blood chilled as she noticed movement on the ridge behind the gas station, the glint of sunlight on metal, scope or binoculars. Either way, they weren't alone. She grabbed her radio, but Marcus had insisted on radio silence to avoid spooking the informant. Her service weapon felt heavy in its holster as she slipped out of her vehicle, using the terrain to mask her approach. The rocky ground crunched softly under her boots, despite her best efforts at stealth. The conversation between Marcus and Needles had grown animated. She could catch fragments now. Something about shipping manifests and offshore accounts, about club members who weren't really club members at all. Needles kept glancing over his shoulder, his paranoia evident even from Chen's position. "They've been planning this for years," Needles was saying as she crept closer. "The whole club thing was just a front. Most of the real members don't even know what's happening. They think they're running drugs and guns like always, but it's so much bigger than that." Marcus leaned forward intently. "What kind of bigger?" "Political money, dark money, campaigns, judges, district attorneys. They've got people in their pockets you wouldn't believe. That pregnant girl, she stumbled onto something that could bring down senators." Chen froze. Maya's condition had been a key piece of the puzzle they couldn't fit together. Why would anyone care about a pregnant woman unless the crack of a rifle split the desert air? Needles dropped instantly, a red bloom spreading across his chest as he crumpled to the asphalt. Marcus dove behind the pickup truck, his own weapon already in hand, scanning the ridge where the shot had originated. Chen's training kicked in. She sprinted toward the service bay, using the building for cover as she radioed for backup and medical assistance. The nearest units were 30 minutes out. They were on their own. "2 o'clock high!" she shouted to Marcus, spotting the muzzle flash from behind a cluster of rocks on the ridge. "Single shooter, maybe 300 yards. Marcus nodded, checking Needles' pulse before grabbing the manila envelope the informant had brought. Whatever was inside had been worth killing for, which made it worth protecting. A second shot rang out, sparking off the concrete near Chen's head. She returned fire, the crack of her service weapon echoing across the desert. The shooter was good, but he'd given away his position. She laid down, suppressing fire, while Marcus circled wide, using the natural terrain to flank their attacker. The desert fell silent except for the wind whistling through the abandoned structure. Chen's heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to track movement on the ridge. Professional shooters didn't usually work alone, which meant there could be others positioning themselves for a better angle. A flash of movement caught her eye, not on the ridge, but much closer. A second figure was using the distraction to approach from their blind spot, moving with the fluid grace of military training. She spun, weapon raised, just as the figure rounded the corner of the building. But instead of the tactical gear she expected, she found herself staring at a young woman in dusty jeans and a faded t-shirt. The woman's hands were raised, but her eyes held the same desperate intelligence Chen had seen in Maya's photographs. "Don't shoot," the woman said quietly. "My name is Rebecca Santos. I'm the one who sent Needles here, and if we don't move right now, we're all going to end up just like him." The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, a fitting backdrop for what Marcus suspected would be his final conversation with the Hells Angels. He'd insisted on meeting alone, against Detective Sarah Chen's protests, but some bridges had to be burned personally. Tommy Wrench Rodriguez emerged from the shadows between 2 stripped motorcycles, his leather vest bearing the colors Marcus once wore with pride. Behind him, 3 other members flanked out in practiced formation, muscle memory from decades of territorial disputes. "Marcus fucking Kane," Wrench said, his voice carrying the weight of old friendship turned sour. "Heard you've been asking questions about things that ain't your business anymore." Marcus kept his hands visible, though he knew these men well enough to read their intentions in their posture. They weren't here to kill him, not yet. Anna Kowalski is dead, Wrench. Shot execution style in her own apartment. That make it my business? Don't know any Anna Kowalski. Wrench pulled out a cigarette, the flame from his lighter casting dancing shadows across his scarred face. "But I hear some pregnant bitch was squatting in our old clubhouse. Shame what happens to trespassers." The casual dismissal ignited something primal in Marcus's chest. She wasn't squatting, she was hiding. "From your people." "My people?" Wrench's laugh was razor sharp. "Brother, you've been out of the life too long. We don't hurt pregnant women. Bad for business, worse for the soul." Marcus studied the faces around him, searching for tells. These men had taught him to lie, but they'd also taught him to spot deception. What he saw wasn't guilt, it was confusion mixed with genuine concern. "Then who killed her?" Marcus pressed. "And why was she living in that shithole with evidence that could bring down half the criminal underground in this city?" Wrench's cigarette paused halfway to his lips. "What kind of evidence?" "Financial records, names, dates, transactions. Stuff that goes back 15 years to when the club was running more than just drugs and guns." Marcus watched recognition flicker across Wrench's features. She had documentation of the human trafficking operation, the one that supposedly never existed. The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop 10 degrees. The other angels exchanged glances, their casual menace replaced by something colder, fear. "That operation was shut down," Wrench said slowly. "Ancient history. Not according to Anna's files. According to her, it just went underground, changed hands, got more sophisticated." Marcus stepped closer, gambling that old loyalty still meant something. "Someone's been using the club's name and connections to move girls across the Canadian border, young girls, runaways nobody would miss." Bullshit. But Wrench's denial lacked conviction. "We voted that shit out years ago. Drugs, guns, protection, that's business. Human trafficking brings heat we can't handle." Then explain why Anna had detailed records of shipments moving through Montreal. Explain why she had photos of club members with known traffickers. Explain why she was so terrified she'd rather live in a condemned building than trust the police. Wrench flicked his cigarette into a puddle, the ember hissing as it died. "Show me." Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling to the photos Detective Chen had shared with him. The screen displayed a bank routing number alongside a partial license plate and timestamp. This transaction happened 3 days before Anna was killed. $50,000 transferred from an account registered to a shell company that's been linked to 6 trafficking investigations across 3 states. One of the other angels, a younger man Marcus didn't recognize, leaned in to look. "Holy shit, that's—" "Shut up, prospect," Wrench snapped, but his eyes remained fixed on the phone screen. "Where'd she get this?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Anna wasn't random. She wasn't some junkie who stumbled onto information. She was placed in that clubhouse for a reason, with specific evidence meant to surface after her death. Marcus pocketed the phone. Someone wanted this information found. The question is whether they wanted it found by the cops, by you, or by whoever's running the trafficking operation. Wrench was quiet for a long moment, processing implications Marcus could see forming behind his calculating eyes. The Hell's Angels had survived decades by knowing when they were being manipulated, when rival factions tried to use them as pawns in larger games. "If what you're saying is true," Wrench finally said, "then someone's been operating under our colors without authorization. That's a death sentence. And if you're lying to me about the club's involvement," Marcus replied, "then Anna's blood is on all your hands." The standoff stretched between them, old brotherhood warring with new suspicions. Finally, Wrench nodded toward the warehouse exit. 24 hours, Kane. I'll make some calls, check some things, but if you're playing games, if this is some elaborate setup to bring down what's left of the club, I'll personally deliver your head to whoever's running this trafficking ring." Marcus turned to leave, but Wrench's voice stopped him. "And Kane, watch your back. If someone killed that girl to send a message, you might be next on their list." The warehouse smelled of rust and diesel fuel, its cavernous interior broken only by shafts of amber light filtering through grimy skylights. Detective Sarah Chen crouched beside the overturned crate, her flashlight beam revealing the scattered contents that had spilled across the oil-stained concrete floor. "Jesus Christ," Murphy whispered behind her, his voice echoing in the vast space. Chen's hands trembling slightly as she photographed the documents. Birth certificates, all blank except for official seals, medical records with names whited out, and beneath those, a leather-bound ledger filled with dates, names, and dollar amounts that made her stomach turn. The numbers were staggering. 50,000, 75,000, $120,000 per transaction, all marked with a simple notation, "Delivery complete." "Sarah, you need to see this." Murphy's voice came from deeper in the warehouse, near what appeared to be a makeshift medical station. Stainless steel tables, 4 poles, and equipment that looked far too sophisticated for a motorcycle club's hideout. She made her way over, stepping carefully around more scattered paperwork. The medical setup was professional grade, complete with monitors and surgical instruments still bearing traces of use. A refrigeration unit hummed quietly in the corner, its door slightly ajar. Murphy stood frozen beside an open filing cabinet, holding a manila folder. His face had gone pale under the harsh beam of his flashlight. "The pregnant woman, Elena. She's not the first." Chen took the folder with hands that she willed to remain steady. Inside were photographs of young women, all visibly pregnant, all bearing the same haunted expression she'd seen in Elena's eyes. Attached to each photo was a medical chart detailing prenatal care, due dates, and delivery information. But it was the final page in each file that made the pieces fall into place with sickening clarity. Adoption papers, all bearing the signature of the same attorney, all listing the same adoption agency as intermediary. "They're selling babies," Chen said, the words falling flat in the stale air. "Not just selling them." Murphy pointed to a notation at the bottom of each adoption form. "Look at the adoptive parents' information." Chen scanned the documents, her trained eye picking out patterns: wealthy couples, significant political connections, CEOs of major corporations, and in several cases, names she recognized from news headlines and society pages. The refrigeration unit's compressor kicked off, leaving them in relative silence. Chen walked over and pulled the door fully open. Vials of medication lined the shelves, along with blood samples and what appeared to be genetic testing materials. "They're not just facilitating adoptions," she realized aloud. "They're breeding specific children for specific buyers." The sound of footsteps on gravel outside made them both freeze. Chen quickly closed the refrigerator door and gestured for Murphy to kill his flashlight. They crouched behind the medical station as voices approached the warehouse entrance. "The shipment needs to move tonight." A man's voice carried through the thin walls. "Too much heat since they found the girl." "What about the others?" This voice was rougher, tinged with the growl of a lifelong smoker. "We've got 3 more due within the month. Relocate them. Use the backup facility in Riverside." Chen felt Murphy tense beside her. She knew he was thinking the same thing she was. 3 more women like Elena, trapped in this nightmare. The voices grew closer as the men entered the warehouse. Footsteps echoed across the concrete, accompanied by the scrape of boxes being moved. Chen risked a glance around the medical station and saw 2 figures silhouetted against the doorway. One wore the leather vest of the Hells Angels, the other was dressed in an expensive suit that seemed wildly out of place in the industrial setting. "The buyers are getting nervous," the suited man continued. "These aren't impulse purchases. These people have waited years for the right genetic match." Chen's blood ran cold as the implications hit her. This wasn't just about selling babies to the highest bidder. Someone was orchestrating a breeding program, matching women with specific genetic profiles to buyers with particular requirements. The leather-clad figure kicked at something on the floor. Should have cleaned this place out yesterday. If the cops find this, they won't. The suited man's voice carried absolute confidence. We have people in place. The investigation will hit a dead end long before it reaches our real clients. Murphy's hand found Chen's shoulder in the darkness, his grip tight with tension. They both understood what they were hearing, confirmation that the conspiracy reached far beyond a motorcycle club's get-rich-quick scheme. The men continued their conversation as they moved boxes, but their voices faded as they worked deeper into the warehouse. Chen knew this was their chance. She gathered as many documents as she could carry, stuffing them into her jacket while Murphy collected vials from the refrigeration unit. They had evidence now, real proof of what Elena had stumbled into, but as they prepared to slip out the way they'd come in, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of something far more sinister than either of them had imagined. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph Detective Martinez had placed on the table between them. The image showed her father, younger and wearing Hell's Angels colors, standing beside a man she'd never seen before, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "His name is Viktor Kozlov," Martinez said quietly. "Russian mob. Your father was feeding him information about federal investigations." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She pressed her palm against her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick restlessly as if sensing her distress. "That's impossible. My father would never—" "The bank records don't lie, Sarah. Regular deposits, always after major busts went sideways, always when cases against Kozlov's associates mysteriously fell apart." Sarah's mind raced back through fragments of memory. Her father's late-night phone calls, his sudden mood swings, the way he'd grown increasingly paranoid in his final months. She'd attributed it all to the stress of his undercover work, but now those memories took on a sinister new meaning. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. Martinez leaned forward. "Because Kozlov thinks you know something. The attacks on the clubhouse, the men who've been watching you, they're his people. He believes your father left behind evidence that could destroy him." Through the interrogation room's small window, Sarah could see Agent Torres pacing in the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear. His expression was grim, and she caught fragments of his conversation. Federal judge, immediate protective custody. The door opened, and Torres stepped inside, his face pale. "We have a problem. Judge Morrison was found dead in his chambers 20 minutes ago. Single gunshot to the head." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Judge Morrison had been overseeing the grand jury investigation into Kozlov's organization. His death wasn't a coincidence. "They're cleaning house," Martinez said grimly. "Anyone who might testify, anyone who might have evidence, they're eliminating them systematically." "But I don't know anything," Sarah's voice cracked. "Whatever my father was involved in, he never told me. I was just a kid when he died." Torres sat down across from her, his expression softening slightly. "Sarah, I need you to think carefully in the weeks before your father's death. Did he give you anything? Ask you to hold on to something for him? Maybe something that seemed insignificant at the time?" Sarah shook her head, then stopped. A memory surfaced, her father pressing an old leather journal into her hands, telling her it was filled with stories she might want to read someday. She'd packed it away with his other belongings, never looking inside. "There was a journal," she said slowly, "but it's at my apartment and I can't go back there. It's not safe." "We can retrieve it," Torres said. "But Sarah, if this journal contains what I think it does, you're going to be the key witness in the biggest organized crime prosecution in decades. That makes you incredibly valuable and incredibly dangerous to some very powerful people." The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Sarah gasped. The stress was affecting everything, making her pregnancy feel more precarious by the hour. She needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere she could think clearly about the impossible choice that lay before her. "There's something else," Martinez said reluctantly. We found surveillance footage from the night your father died. Sarah, we don't think his overdose was accidental. The room seemed to spin around her. Sarah gripped the edge of the table, fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. You're saying he was murdered? The evidence suggests it was made to look like an overdose. But the timing, combined with what we know now about his work with Kozlov, it's too convenient. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process the avalanche of revelations. Her father hadn't just been a corrupt cop, he'd been caught between two deadly forces, and ultimately, one of them had killed him. Now she was trapped in the same web, carrying secrets she didn't even know she possessed. A commotion in the hallway made them all turn. Through the window, Sarah could see officers running, their hands on their weapons. Torres's radio crackled to life, shots fired in the parking garage. All units respond. They found us, Torres said grimly, drawing his weapon. Martinez, get her to the safe room, now! As Martinez helped her to her feet, Sarah felt a crushing weight of certainty settle over her. Kozlov's reach was longer than anyone had imagined, his resources more extensive than the authorities had prepared for. The journal hidden in her apartment might contain the evidence needed to bring him down, but first, she had to survive long enough to retrieve it. The sound of gunfire echoed through the building, growing closer with each passing second. The warehouse smelled like motor oil and fear. Detective Sarah Chen pressed herself against the corrugated metal wall, listening to the rumble of motorcycle engines growing closer. Beside her, Agent Morrison checked his weapon one more time, his jaw tight with concentration. 3 minutes until backup arrives, he whispered into his radio. Sarah's mind raced back to the documents they'd found in Maya's room. The shipping manifests, the coded communications, the photographs of military-grade weapons being loaded into unmarked trucks. The Hells Angels weren't just running drugs through the port. They were facilitating arms deals that could destabilize half the continent. The sound of boots on concrete echoed through the cavernous space ahead. Sarah counted at least 6 distinct sets of footsteps, maybe more. Through a gap in the metal sheeting, she caught glimpses of movement in the dim warehouse interior. Crates stacked 20 feet high created a maze of shadows and hiding spots. Movement on the east side, Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. He'd taken position near the loading dock while she circled around to cover the main entrance. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Reynolds at the hospital, Maya asking for you. Says it's urgent about the baby's father. The baby's father. Sarah had been so focused on the conspiracy, she'd almost forgotten that someone had gotten Maya pregnant while she was essentially a prisoner in that clubhouse. Someone who might be at the center of this entire operation. A door slammed somewhere in the warehouse, followed by raised voices. Sarah recognized one of them, Tommy Razor Williams, the club's sergeant-at-arms. His distinctive, gravelly voice carried across the space. The cops found everything at the clubhouse. We need to move the shipment tonight. Another voice, higher pitched and nervous. What about the girl? She knows too much. The girl's not our problem anymore. Phoenix is. Sarah's blood ran cold. Phoenix. That was the code name they'd seen repeatedly in the documents. The mysterious figure orchestrating the entire operation. Someone with access to military weapons, shipping schedules, and enough influence to keep the operation running for months without detection. She crept closer, using the stacked crates for cover. The voices were coming from an improvised office area, a few folding tables and chairs set up in a cleared section of the warehouse floor. Through the gaps between boxes, she could see 4 men hunched over what looked like shipping documents. Phoenix wants everything cleaned up before the Senators' Committee announces the hearings, Razor was saying. Too much heat coming down. Senators' Committee. Sarah's mind raced. Senator Patricia Vance had been pushing for increased oversight of port security. If Phoenix had advanced knowledge of the hearings, it meant someone with high-level government access was feeding information to the Angels. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Morrison. 2 more vehicles just arrived. We're outnumbered. Sarah looked around desperately. The warehouse had to have a back exit, maybe a fire door or loading bay she could reach without being seen. but as she started to move, her foot caught on a loose piece of rebar. The metallic clang echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. The voices stopped. "Check that out," Razor commanded. Heavy footsteps approached her position. Sarah drew her weapon and pressed herself deeper into the shadows between two crates. Through a narrow gap, she saw a man with gang tattoos covering his neck, scanning the area where she'd made the noise. Her radio crackled softly. "Chen, report your position." The tattooed man's head snapped toward the sound. Sarah held her breath as he moved closer, his own weapon drawn. 20 feet, 15, 10. A sudden crash from the loading dock area drew his attention away. Morrison was creating a distraction, but it wouldn't buy her much time. Sarah made a decision. She couldn't wait for backup. Too much was at stake, and if these men disappeared into the night, they might never get another chance to uncover the full scope of the conspiracy. She moved quickly through the maze of crates, heading toward the office area where Razor and the others were gathered. The documents on their table might contain the final pieces of the puzzle: shipping schedules, contact information, maybe even Phoenix's real identity. But as she rounded the corner, she found herself face to face with a fifth man she hadn't seen before. He was older, well-dressed, completely out of place in the grimy warehouse setting. What made her blood freeze wasn't his appearance, though. It was the badge clipped to his belt. "Federal Marshal, Detective Chen," he said calmly, his own weapon already drawn and pointed at her chest. "I was wondering when you'd show up here." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Phoenix wasn't just getting information from someone in government. Phoenix was someone in government. Someone with the authority to access shipping records, weapons manifests, and sensitive intelligence about ongoing investigations. Someone who'd been watching their every move since they first discovered Maya in that abandoned clubhouse. Detective Sarah Chen's phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m., jolting her from restless sleep. The caller ID showed Marcus Rodriguez, and his voice carried an urgency she'd rarely heard. "We got him," Rodriguez said without preamble. "Tank Morrison's in custody, but Sarah, you need to get down here. Now." 20 minutes later, Chen stood outside the interrogation room at the precinct, watching through one-way glass as Tank Morrison sat shackled to a metal chair. The massive biker looked smaller somehow, his usual swagger replaced by something that bordered on panic. "Where'd you find him?" Chen asked Rodriguez, who was nursing his third cup of coffee. "Gas station off Highway 9, trying to buy a bus ticket to Mexico with cash. Had a duffel bag full of clothes and about 15 grand in small bills." Rodriguez paused. "And this?" He handed her a manila envelope. Inside were photographs, surveillance shots of the clubhouse, detailed floor plans, and what appeared to be shipping manifests with dates going back 18 months. "He was documenting everything," Chen murmured, studying the images. "But why?" "That's what we need to find out. There's something else, though. He keeps asking about Maya. Wants to know if she's safe." Chen looked up sharply. "Safe from what?" "Won't say. Just keeps repeating that they don't know what they're dealing with. Claims the whole thing is bigger than we think." Through the glass, Tank suddenly looked directly at the mirror, as if he could see them watching. His lips moved silently, forming what looked like the word "help." Chen entered the interrogation room alone, settling across from Tank with deliberate calm. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched in deep lines around his eyes, the nervous tremor in his hands. "You wanted to talk to someone in charge," she said. "I'm Detective Chen. I've been investigating the clubhouse situation." Tank leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. "Is Maya alive?" "She's safe. Her baby too." Chen watched his shoulders sag with relief. "But I need you to help me understand what's been happening. Those documents you had—" "Insurance," Tank interrupted. "I knew this day would come. When Bishop started talking about the endgame, I knew I had to protect myself. Bishop's dead. Tank. Someone put 2 bullets in his head." Tank's face went ashen. "When?" 3 days ago. Same time Maya went missing from the safe house." Chen leaned back. "Funny coincidence, don't you think?" You don't understand. Tank's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. Bishop wasn't running this operation. He was middle management, just like me. The real players, they're still out there. Then tell me who they are. Tank glanced nervously at the corners of the room, checking for cameras. Those shipping manifests in my bag, they're not for drugs or guns. The angels have been moving people, women mostly. Some barely 18. Chen felt ice form in her stomach. Human trafficking? Worse than that. These women, they're being sold to specific buyers, wealthy men who want complete control, total ownership. Some of the girls disappear into private compounds and are never seen again. Tank's hands clenched into fists. Maya found out about it. That's why they wanted her dead. The pieces began clicking into place in Chen's mind. The pregnancy was never random. They targeted her specifically because she was young, healthy, and had no family to ask questions. The baby was part of the package. Jesus Christ. Chen stood abruptly, pacing to the corner of the room. Who's buying these women? Who are we talking about here? Politicians, judges, business executives. People with enough money and power to make problems disappear. Tank's voice cracked. I got names, bank account numbers, everything. But if they find out Maya's still alive... The lights in the interrogation room suddenly flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Through the door, Chen could hear shouting in the corridor. What the hell? She muttered, moving toward the door. Tank's voice behind her was barely audible. They're here. Chen spun around. Who's here? Before Tank could answer, the door burst open. Rodriguez stumbled inside, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Sarah, we need to move. Now. Someone just took out our entire security system, and there are vehicles surrounding the building. Through the small window high on the wall, Chen could see headlights cutting through the darkness outside. Multiple vehicles, positioned strategically around the precinct. Tank was already standing, somehow having slipped one hand free from his restraints. There's another way out through the old tunnels in the basement, but we need to get Maya and disappear before they realize we're gone. The documents, Chen said, grabbing the manila envelope. Are these copies? Tank nodded grimly. Copies of copies. The originals are somewhere safe. The sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere in the building. Rodriguez was already at the door, weapon drawn. Move, he shouted. Whatever this conspiracy is, they're willing to shoot up a police station to protect it. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town looked like every other derelict building Maya had seen in her weeks of hiding, but the smell hit her first. Motor oil, rust, and something else she couldn't identify. Tommy's hand pressed against her lower back as they approached the rusted door, his touch both protective and urgent. This is where Kozlov said he'd be? Maya whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind rattling through broken windows above. Tommy nodded, his jaw tight, said he had the files that would prove everything, the real ledgers, the shipping manifests, even recordings of Vance giving orders. He paused, scanning the empty lot around them. Too easy. Maya's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where their child had been kicking restlessly all morning, as if sensing the tension that had consumed them both since fleeing the clubhouse. The baby's movements had become her anchor, a reminder of what they were fighting for beyond just their own survival. The door creaked open before Tommy could knock. Kozlov stood in the shadows, his scarred face grim, holding a leather messenger bag that looked like it had survived a war. Behind him, the warehouse stretched into darkness, punctuated by shafts of dim light filtering through holes in the roof. You're late, Kozlov said, stepping aside to let them enter. Vance's men were here an hour ago, sweeping the perimeter. They're getting desperate. Inside, Maya could see makeshift tables covered with documents, photographs, and what appeared to be recording equipment. Her breath caught as she recognized some of the faces in the photos. City council members, police officials, federal agents. All people she'd seen entering and leaving the clubhouse during her weeks there. Jesus, Tommy breathed, moving toward the nearest table. How long has this been going on? 15 years minimum, Kozlov replied, following them deeper into the warehouse. Started a simple money laundering through the auto shop. Vance had connections with dirty cops who'd feed information about raids, investigations. But then it grew. Maya picked up a photograph, showing Vance shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit outside what looked like a government building. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 weeks ago. "Who is this?" "Deputy Attorney General Morrison, the man who's been ensuring that every investigation into the Reapers hits bureaucratic walls." Kozlov's voice carried a bitter edge. "Vance doesn't just run a motorcycle club, Maya. He runs a network that reaches into federal law enforcement." Tommy was studying a shipping manifest, his face pale. "These dates, Maya, look at this. These are the nights you heard them moving things through the back rooms. Large quantities, regular schedules." Maya moved closer, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through her lower back. The documents showed regular shipments coming through the port, all cleared by customs officials whose names appeared on Kozlov's payroll lists. But it wasn't just drugs. There were weapons, ammunition, and something listed only as specialized equipment. "What kind of specialized equipment?" she asked. Kozlov's expression darkened, the kind that makes you wonder if this is bigger than just a regional crime syndicate. He handed her a folder marked with federal classification stamps. "Vance has been selling military-grade surveillance technology to private militias, foreign contacts, anyone willing to pay. Some of this equipment was supposed to be destroyed after government contracts ended." A sound from outside made all three of them freeze, the low rumble of motorcycle engines growing closer. Tommy immediately moved to the window, peering through a gap in the boarded-up frame. 6 bikes, maybe more. Vance is with them. Tommy's voice was tight with urgency. "We need to go, now." Kozlov was already shoving documents into multiple bags, his movements practiced and efficient. "There's a back exit through the loading dock. My car's there." But as they moved toward the rear of the warehouse, Maya felt a sharp contraction that nearly brought her to her knees. She gasped, one hand clutching her belly, the other grabbing Tommy's arm for support. "The baby," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. "Something's wrong." Tommy's face went white. "How wrong?" "Maya, talk to me." Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and she could feel wetness between her legs. I think my water just broke." The sound of the motorcycles was getting louder, accompanied now by shouting voices and the creak of the front door being forced open. Kozlov appeared at their side, his scarred face showing rare concern. "There's a clinic about 10 miles from here. Doc Patterson owes me favors, won't ask questions." He looked between Maya's pale face and the approaching sounds of their pursuers. "But we have to move right now." Maya tried to take a step and felt another wave of pain wash over her. The baby was coming, whether they were ready or not, and somewhere behind them in the darkness, she could hear Vance's voice calling her name, promising safety if she'd just surrender the evidence they'd gathered. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town felt like stepping into a tomb. Detective Sarah Chen moved carefully through the darkness, her flashlight cutting through dust motes that danced like ghosts in the beam. Behind her, Agent Martinez and the tactical team spread out in formation, their boots echoing against concrete that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. "Movement sensor picked up activity here 3 hours ago," Martinez whispered into his radio. "Could be our missing link." Sarah's mind raced back to Emma's revelation about the storage facility. The pregnant woman had been more forthcoming since Dr. Hoffman's arrest, but every answer seemed to spawn 3 new questions. The physician's connection to the angels went deeper than anyone had imagined, deeper and far more sinister. There, Martinez pointed to a steel door marked with faded warning signs. Fresh scratches around the lock suggested recent activity. The door swung open with surprising ease, revealing a staircase descending into blackness. The smell hit them immediately, a mixture of motor oil, cigarettes, and something else. Something organic and wrong. "Jesus," one of the tactical officers muttered behind his mask. The basement opened into a vast space, divided by metal shelving units that stretched toward the ceiling. But instead of the expected drug lab or weapons cache, they found something that made Sarah's blood run cold. Row upon row of filing cabinets lined the walls, their contents spilling onto makeshift tables, medical records, birth certificates, adoption papers, thousands of them spanning decades. In the center of the room, multiple computer workstations hummed quietly, their screens casting an eerie blue glow across the organized chaos. "Martinez, you need to see this." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper as she approached the nearest table. The documents were meticulously organized by year, then by facility. Harbor General Hospital, St. Mary's Medical Center, Riverside Community Health. Every major medical facility in the tri-state area was represented. Martinez leaned over her shoulder, reading from a file marked with Emma's name. Birth mother, Emma Walsh. Father, unknown. Adoptive family, pending assignment. He flipped through additional pages. "Look at this. There are dozens of other women listed. All young, all unmarried, all connected to the angels somehow." "It's not just adoption records," Sarah said, moving to another table. "Look at these financial documents. Wire transfers, offshore accounts, payment schedules." She traced her finger down a spreadsheet. 50,000 per placement, with bonuses for specific characteristics. The tactical team leader approached from the far corner of the basement. "Detectives, we found something else. You're not going to like it." He led them to a section hidden behind black curtains. Inside, medical equipment filled the space. Examination tables, ultrasound machines, surgical instruments, everything needed for a private medical facility, operated far from prying eyes and regulatory oversight. Dr. Hoffman wasn't just facilitating adoptions, Sarah realized, her voice hollow. He was running a breeding operation. Martinez pulled out his phone, photographing everything. The Hells Angels weren't just muscle for this operation, they were suppliers. Finding vulnerable women, keeping them isolated, ensuring compliance. A soft sound from the corner made them all freeze. Behind another partition, they discovered a small living area, a bed, a mini refrigerator, basic amenities. Recent use was evident in the unmade sheets and half-eaten meal on the nightstand. "Someone's been living here," the team leader observed. Recently, Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Detective Chen, we've got movement outside. Multiple vehicles approaching your location. How many?" "At least 6 motorcycles, 2 vans. ETA 3 minutes. Martinez was already moving toward the exit. "They know we're here. This whole thing could be a setup." Sarah lingered, studying the computer screens. One monitor displayed what appeared to be a client database, wealthy couples from across the country, some with specific requests that made her stomach turn. Another showed financial records indicating the operation had generated millions of dollars over nearly 2 decades. "Sarah, we need to go. Now." She grabbed a handful of files and a portable drive from one of the computers. "This is evidence of human trafficking on a massive scale. These women weren't willing participants, they were prisoners." The sound of motorcycle engines grew louder outside. Through a grimy window, Sarah could see headlights cutting through the darkness, surrounding the building in a coordinated pattern. "Back exit!" Martinez shouted, but the tactical leader was already shaking his head. "Blocked. They've got us surrounded." Sarah's mind raced through their options. The Angels wouldn't have come here unless they planned to eliminate every trace of the operation and everyone who'd seen it. Emma's cooperation had forced their hand, but now she and Martinez were trapped in the heart of a conspiracy that reached further than either of them had imagined. "How many rounds do we have?" she asked, checking her service weapon. The question hung in the air as the motorcycle engines fell silent outside, replaced by the sound of heavy boots on concrete and voices coordinating an assault. They were no longer investigating the conspiracy. They had become its targets. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town felt like a tomb when Sarah pushed open the rusted metal door. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stale air, Detective Morrison had insisted she wait for backup, but the cryptic message from Marcus had been clear: come alone, or the evidence would disappear forever. Her footsteps echoed against concrete walls as she moved deeper into the cavernous space. Somewhere in the shadows, water dripped steadily from a leaking pipe. The smell of motor oil and decay hung heavy in the air, reminding her of the clubhouse where this nightmare had begun 3 weeks ago. "Marcus!" she called out, her voice swallowing into the emptiness. A figure emerged from behind a stack of shipping containers, limping slightly. Marcus looked haggard, his leather jacket torn and his face bearing fresh bruises. Even in the dim light, Sarah could see the fear in his eyes. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I wasn't sure you would. You said you had proof about who's really behind the organ trafficking ring. After what happened to Elena—" "Elena's alive," Marcus interrupted, stepping closer. "That's what I needed to tell you. The explosion at the safe house was staged. Kozlov has her." Sarah's heart lurched. They'd found pieces of Elena's clothing in the wreckage, blood evidence that suggested the worst. The pregnant woman who had stumbled into their investigation had become more than just a witness. She'd become the key to unraveling decades of corruption. "How do you know she's alive?" Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. "Because I've been feeding information to both sides this whole time. The Hells Angels wanted to know what the cops knew. Kozlov's people wanted to know what the Angels knew. I was playing them against each other, trying to stay alive long enough to get my sister out of this mess." "Your sister?" "Elena." His voice cracked slightly. "Half-sister technically. Same father, different mothers. When she got pregnant and started asking questions about our father's old associates, she stumbled onto something big. Bigger than just organ trafficking." Sarah kept her weapon drawn but pointed downward. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, yet something in Marcus's demeanor suggested he was finally telling the truth. "Show me what you have." Marcus tapped the phone screen, and a video began playing. The footage was grainy, clearly shot in secret, but the faces were unmistakable. Deputy Chief Hamilton sat across from Victor Kozlov in what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. Between them lay manila envelopes thick with cash. "This was taken 6 months ago," Marcus explained, "but the relationship goes back years. Hamilton's been providing police protection for Kozlov's operations, not just the organ trafficking, money laundering, human trafficking, arms dealing. The Hells Angels were just middle management." The video continued, showing Hamilton passing documents across the table. Sarah recognized the police department letterhead, even in the poor quality footage. Hamilton knew Elena had seen too much when she started asking about medical facilities connected to the club. That's why he wanted her eliminated. But Kozlov had a better idea. Keep her alive as leverage to control the investigation. "Where is she?" "Kozlov's private medical facility. The same place they've been harvesting organs. Elena's pregnancy makes her valuable in ways I don't want to think about." Marcus's jaw tightened. "But there's more. The facility isn't just local, it's part of an international network. They've been using the Hells Angels chapters across the country as recruiting grounds, targeting members' families who won't be missed." Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Morrison's name appeared on the screen. She glanced at Marcus, then answered. "Sarah, where the hell are you? Hamilton's been asking questions about your whereabouts. Something's not right." "I know," she said quietly. "Hamilton's compromised. He's been working with Kozlov." Silence stretched across the connection before Morrison's voice returned, tense and urgent. "Get out of there now. Hamilton just left the station with a tactical team, said he had intel on your location." The sound of vehicles approaching echoed from outside the warehouse. Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. "There's a back exit through the loading dock. We can still get to Elena if we move now." Sarah looked toward the main entrance, where headlights were beginning to sweep across the building's exterior. Hamilton had found them faster than anticipated. Either Marcus was still playing both sides, or the deputy chief had resources they hadn't accounted for. "The evidence," she said. "We need to get it to Morrison." Marcus was already moving toward the rear of the warehouse. "I've uploaded everything to a secure server. Morrison will get the access codes if we don't make it out. The sound of boots hitting concrete came from multiple directions now. They were surrounded. The warehouse echoed with the sound of boots on concrete as Detective Sarah Chen led the tactical team through the maze of shipping containers. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a reminder of how close they were to either triumph or catastrophe. The information Maya had provided was their only shot at stopping the serpents before they could execute their plan. Heat signatures confirmed, whispered Officer Rodriguez through her earpiece. 12 targets, northwest corner. 2 vehicles out back, engines running. Sarah raised her fist, bringing the team to a halt behind a stack of crates marked with innocuous shipping labels that she now knew concealed military-grade explosives. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Hells Angels had unknowingly been shipping the very weapons that would be used to destroy them. Through a gap in the containers, she could see the serpents gathered around a table covered in blueprints and communication equipment. Marcus Steele stood at the center, his scarred face illuminated by the glow of multiple cell phone screens. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the cold calculation in his movements as he coordinated with his scattered cells. "Phoenix team reports the courthouse is clear," came a voice from one of the phones. "Federal building has 2 security guards, both neutralized. Blackwater team standing by at the Angels' main clubhouse," said another. "Charges are set, waiting for your signal." Sarah's blood ran cold. They weren't just targeting the courthouse and federal building. They were planning to frame the Hells Angels by bombing their own clubhouse, making it look like an internal war had gone catastrophically wrong. The bodies of the club members would be found in the rubble, painted as domestic terrorists who had died in their own explosion. She pressed her radio. "All units, this is Chen. We need coordinated strikes on 3 locations. I repeat, 3 locations." But before she could relay the addresses, one of the serpents spotted movement in the shadows. The man's shout of alarm shattered the warehouse's tense quiet, and suddenly the space erupted into chaos. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." The tactical team poured from behind the containers, like water breaking through a dam. Muzzle flashes lit up the warehouse in strobing bursts as the serpents scattered, some diving for cover behind equipment, while others made desperate runs for the exits. Sarah kept her focus on Steele, who had snatched up a laptop and was backing toward a service door. She couldn't let him escape, not when he was likely the only one who knew all the target locations and could call off the attacks. She sprinted across the open floor, dodging behind a forklift as bullets sparked off the concrete around her. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled her nostrils as she tracked Steele's movement. He was almost to the door when she made her move, launching herself from cover in a desperate tackle. They went down hard, the laptop skittering across the floor. Steele was stronger than she'd expected, his hands finding her throat with practiced efficiency. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision as she clawed at his grip, fighting to breathe. "You have no idea what you're stopping," he hissed, his breath hot against her face. "The Angels are a cancer. We're the cure." Sarah managed to drive her knee into his solar plexus, breaking his grip long enough to gasp for air. "You're not curing anything," she wheezed. "You're just another kind of disease." The laptop screen was still glowing nearby, showing a chat window with timestamps counting down. "Phoenix team, T-4 minutes. Blackwater team, T-6 minutes. Federal building team, T-3 minutes. 3 minutes. Sarah dove for the laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she tried to access the abort commands. Behind her, she could hear Steele struggling to his feet, cursing in a mixture of English and what sounded like military code. "Stand down, all teams," she typed frantically. "Mission compromised. Abort immediately." But even as she sent the message, she knew it might not be enough. These men were fanatics, convinced they were saving the world from a threat that existed more in their minds than in reality. They might ignore the abort order, especially if they thought Steele was compromised. The gunfire in the warehouse was tapering off as the tactical team secured the remaining serpents, but Sarah's attention was fixed on the laptop screen. One by one, the cell leaders began responding. Phoenix team, negative on abort. Steele said to ignore any stand-down orders if comms were compromised. Her heart sank. They had planned for this contingency too. Federal building team, 2 minutes to detonation. Cannot abort. Charges are on timer, not remote. Sarah grabbed her radio with shaking hands. All units, we have active bombs at 3 locations: Federal Building, Courthouse, and the Hells Angels Clubhouse on Morrison Street. Bomb squad to all locations immediately. As sirens began wailing in the distance, Sarah realized they had won the battle but might still lose the war. The next few minutes would determine whether their victory tonight would be remembered as the moment they stopped a terrorist conspiracy or the moment they failed to prevent a massacre. The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, its cavernous space echoing with the distant hum of traffic from the interstate. Sarah pressed herself against the cold concrete wall, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly, the other clutching the flash drive that contained everything: bank records, shipping manifests, communications between Razor and his network of corrupt officials, the evidence that would finally expose the arms trafficking operation that had consumed the Crimson Serpents from within. Detective Martinez crouched beside her, his radio crackling with updates from the tactical units surrounding the building. "They're moving into position," he whispered. "Razor's crew is already inside. We end this tonight." Through the grimy windows, Sarah could see the headlights of motorcycles cutting through the darkness as more club members arrived for what they believed was an emergency meeting. What they didn't know was that half the men riding those bikes were undercover federal agents who had spent months infiltrating the organization. "I should be out there," Sarah said, her voice tight with determination despite her advanced pregnancy. "I know these people. I know how Razor thinks." Martinez shook his head firmly. "You've done enough, more than enough. Let us finish what you started." The sound of heavy boots echoed through the warehouse as figures began filing into the main floor below them. Sarah recognized Razor's distinctive limp, the result of a motorcycle accident years earlier that had left him bitter and hungry for the power that guns and money could provide. Beside him walked Tommy Chen, the accountant whose gambling debts had made him vulnerable to corruption, and Detective Kowalski from the Narcotics Division, whose badge had provided crucial protection for their operations. "The shipment from Montenegro arrives Thursday." Razor's voice carried clearly in the cavernous space. "Kowalski, I need your people to make sure the docks stay clear. Chen, the money needs to be clean by Friday morning." Sarah's heart pounded as she watched the conspiracy unfold below her for the final time. For months, she had lived in that abandoned clubhouse, gathering evidence while pretending to be nothing more than Razor's pregnant girlfriend seeking shelter. The authorities had expected to find drugs when they discovered her there, but instead she had handed them something far more dangerous: proof of a network that reached into police departments, city government, and federal agencies. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, and Sarah gasped, doubling over. Martinez immediately turned to her with concern. "What is it?" "The baby," she managed through gritted teeth. "I think—" Another contraction, stronger this time, cut off her words. The timing couldn't have been worse. Below them, Razor was outlining the details of a weapons shipment that would flood the streets with military-grade assault rifles and explosives. The raid had to happen now, while all the key players were present and the evidence was being discussed openly. Martinez spoke urgently into his radio. "Control, we need medical standing by. The witness is in labor." "Negative on the delay," came the response. "Target is discussing imminent threat to public safety. We're moving in 60 seconds. Sarah struggled to her feet, breathing heavily. "I'm not leaving, not when we're this close." The warehouse erupted in chaos as federal agents burst through the doors, their shouts of "Federal agents, nobody move!" reverberating off the metal walls. Below them, some of Razor's men reached for weapons, while others threw their hands up in surrender. The undercover agents revealed themselves, creating confusion and preventing what could have been a bloodbath. Razor's eyes swept the warehouse frantically, and Sarah knew he was looking for escape routes he wouldn't find. Every exit was covered, every contingency planned for. Months of careful preparation were culminating in this moment. Another contraction hit her, and this time Sarah couldn't suppress the cry that escaped her lips. The sound carried, and Razor's head snapped up toward their hiding spot. Recognition dawned on his face as he spotted her silhouette against the window. "You," he snarled, even as agents moved to restrain him. "You lying bitch! I should have known." But there was defeat in his voice now, the resignation of a man who understood that his empire was crumbling. The flash drive in Sarah's hand contained financial records spanning 3 years, communications with arms dealers across Eastern Europe, and documentation of bribes paid to dozens of officials. The Crimson Serpent's transformation from a motorcycle club into an international arms trafficking organization was over. As the agents led Razor and his conspirators away in handcuffs, Martinez helped Sarah down the stairs toward the ambulance that was already racing toward the scene. Her baby would be born into a world where this particular threat had been neutralized, where the evidence she had risked everything to gather would ensure that justice was finally served. The conspiracy that had nearly torn apart the city was finished, but Sarah's new life was just beginning.